This conference will now be recorded.
Yeah, hello all. Good evening. Good morning. So we will start our session today, which is our second session. But quickly, I will give you in 5 minutes what we did in the last session because if someone hasn't joined us today, so the last Friday, Thursday, I guess. Yeah. So chaos engineering. The people who don't know what is this course about, it is more sort of people who want to start their career into a systems reliability engineer. So this SRE role is getting more and more popular with this coming days because this role was first started by Google because as you know they have distributed systems and their systems are so complex that they wanted some person or a role who can more sort of a like who can handle their production environment and who can handle those complex systems, who can test it, who can like as you know when the systems become more and more complex, more and more distributed, the systems are like on different languages, different architecture, different databases. So like there is always a chaos between these when they interact with each other. So a SRE is a person who takes care of all those. So he's a person who handles those testings, those operations. So you can call like an SRE is a person who is a chaos engineer with a little deeper knowledge in the architecture and also a bit of a DevOps knowledge, so that he has this mix of, I will say, a mixed way of handling things. So we will be seeing like so here in our course we will be seeing extensively on chaos engineering. So what is chaos engineering? Why is it getting more and more popular nowadays? And what are the major tools we use to to impart the chaos, or let's say to inject the chaos into the system? How do we analyze it? How do we monitor it? What all metrics are we interested in? Then what all types of chaos you can generate? What all types of failures you can simulate using our tools? Then what all areas of production you need to be worried about when you analyze something or when you create your test cases, or let's say you are performing a test experiment or a chaos experiment. We call experiments in chaos engineering, we don't call a test. So when you're running an experiment, what test cases you need to cover, how to understand a system deeply, a distributed system which has like some n microservices. So which to go first, which to go last. So all these questions, we will be covering all those in our curriculum. It's an extensive course. So most of the things will be covered. Then later on, it will be becoming like it will be very simple for you to uh, go into the journey of an SRE or advanced chaos engineering concepts, such which needs a bit of let's say an architect role. You want to go to a chaos architect, or let's say in that roles. So how to proceed to those? So all this will be a really helpful course. And once we complete our course, we'll also do a certification, which is apart from what you get from Isha. It will be the Gremlin certification, tool certification, Gremlin practitioner. That's a simple, anyway, a simple certification only, but still we will do that too. So that when you go after this course, you have one certificate with you also with the Isha certification. So that's our total plan of the course, which we discussed extensively last Thursday. So this is just an overview I gave. So let's move on to our first module. Though these sessions are called demos, these are continuous sessions. So we won't be repeating any session for the coming session. So it's basically these are like module one. We will proceed. Now there won't be any coming back once demo is over. So these are the sessions. Okay. So yeah. Let's begin with module one. This is an introductory module. Here, first of all, we will speak about what is introduction, like because you are entering into something very new. Like even many people have this question: what is chaos engineering, and why do we do it? How do we do it, and how do we apply this to an organization, and all those. So that we will discuss. What is first of all an introduction, a basic introduction, then some principles which are the foundations of chaos engineering. We will see that what are those principles and all those. Then what is like a general chaos engineer role is there. So what are activities he performs, how the mentality of a chaos engineer should be, and all those. Then the process of chaos engineering, we'll see like how a chaos engineering experiment is done, what process we follow and all those. Then some prerequisites. You will see for what are the prerequisites for chaos engineering. Then we will be seeing like a simple experiment, like how do we break a system. Then how you plan a simple experiment, first experiment, like just an intro, a basic one. Then we will deep dive later on in module 2 and module 3's. Different tools will come. Then we'll have a um, like our tool Gremlin will start. So we will be performing different experiments on Kubernetes, Docker, databases. Then we have instances, a specific standalone instances, hosts. So we have different some 6 to 8 sort of experiments which we'll do on different systems. We will starting from scratch, like starting from installing the Kubernetes to, let's say, Kubernetes. If you are saying, then installing the Kubernetes to installing the Gremlin agent to that, then performing the initial setup, then performing the experiments, different type of experiments on Kubernetes, microservices and all. So we'll be seeing all those in the coming modules. Module 1 covers these introductory sessions. Yeah, so right, let's see how, like what led to the rise of chaos engineering. Like this question comes because whenever something has like some need has arrived in the industry, there are some supporting technology or something which has popped up, which is a reason for that. So rise of chaos engineering, you can track it back to the development of distributed systems, right? In now the industry standard has become like many projects are getting into distributed systems which are very complex. Like let's say if you have some 4 microservices or 5 microservices, they are like working on different programs, different databases, different architecture. Now we have dockers, so things are getting more simpler to deploy things. So overall the integration has become really complex, and also the distributed systems are easily scalable too nowadays. So microservices are getting added up, and so that's it's a total chaos. Okay, if when it goes to production, because people say there are no issues. We are testing it beforehand, but there are still outages happening, and outages are really costly affair. That's where a chaos engineer or a chaos engineering comes into play to avoid those outages, to test the system how well it reacts to a let's say a outage, or how well the system is recovering from the event, or and how the end user experience is, because ultimately the business brand value or the business goodwill is very much important for a client. Okay, so that is the main place where the chaos engineer plays. It's his own playground, because he improves the business goodwill by making the production environment more and more reliable and resilient. So that's how we can say a chaos engineer has a major role in. Then again, cloud architecture, microservices. So it has become more complex. Cloud, like as you know, like Netflix, when they introduced Chaos Monkey, which was the first tool of chaos engineering, they were going on to AWS cloud, Netflix. So that was the need why they wanted to have a chaos tool to test it on. So cloud architecture is the major starting or the pivoting point where the chaos engineering started. Then, as I said, outages are too expensive. So people came to know, okay, there is a need for chaos engineering in this current systems, and just the common traditional testings are not enough to avoid these outages or to improve our systems. So overall, you can call it like a vaccine. It will help us to prevent many of the production issues which are happening nowadays, the severity incidents and all those. So our major goal, so why these are important, is you need to keep these things in back of your mind whenever you design something or whenever you think like a chaos experiment. These are the major foundations, objectives which we are trying to achieve to avoid these things, to resolve these issues and all those. So we need to have this understanding why the chaos engineering is required. So this is the reason. Okay, so it's like a vaccine, you can call it, to prevent those issues, or the to resolve these complexities, and to have a testing practice which is not being tested separately, but we have to do it now because of this architecture and all. Things that are not covered by other testing practices, which we can't do it through other testing practices and all those. Then our even chaos engineering is nowadays applied to give architectural recommendations, like the recovery time and all those, to tune our systems to improve the reliability of the system and all. Yeah. So if we see the history, right, just quickly, let's go back to the history of chaos. As I said, Netflix was the company who first applied chaos engineering into their organization when they were going on to AWS architecture. Like they were hosting their services onto AWS, so they had to uh, do the experiment onto like chaos experiments they had to plan. So they introduced a tool called Chaos Monkey. So Chaos Monkey was a tool which had only like you can just shut down an instance and all those. The failure injections were less in Chaos Monkey. So they came with other failures injections like latency hiding and all those. So with Chaos Gorilla, Chaos Kong, and all those. And these all together they called Simian Army, right? So they called with the name of Simian Army. So later on, what they did was many were going on to cloud. The architecture was becoming more and more difficult and all those stuff. So what they did as a thing, they just dropped the Chaos Monkey onto GitHub. So it had become an open source, anyone could use it, and people started playing over it, and thus started the journey of chaos engineering. People started making their own tools. The developments happened, more and more refinements happened, and things proceed with more speed. So this is how what happened was there was a person who was in this team of Netflix, who worked on the Simian Army and all those. So he's a co-founder of Gremlin, which is our industry leading tool in chaos engineering. So with his knowledge, he started Gremlin, and Gremlin is very much a tool which is getting more and more popular nowadays. Now I will say which is the industry. I will say leading tool also. Most of the projects are using Gremlin, though there are many open source tools, but more reliable, more support based, or let's say more easier to use is Gremlin. Though we have Chaos Toolkit, Chaos Blade, and all those, which we'll be seeing what are the differences and how do they compare with each other. Because if anyone wants to apply some open source tool to their project, they need to know how to do that. So we'll be seeing Chaos Toolkit as a tool, as an open source. We'll also see a comparison of all these tools with each other, like Chaos Blade, Chaos Toolkit, Chaos Monkey. There are some n number of tools like AWS Fault Injection Simulator and all those. And ultimately, we will be seeing extensively on Gremlin because that's our industry standard now. Many experiments we need to run using Gremlin, so we'll be seeing. But ultimately, the fundamentals remain same. So if you change the tool, only the let's say if you are applying Chaos Blade, only the thing is you need to know how to install it, how the agent and all. Later on, the processes are same, like the fundamentals or the principles. Yeah. So later on, as I said, so Gremlin came and thus began the journey of chaos engineering. Lot of tools came later on: Chaos Blade, Chaos Toolkit, Chaos Mesh, then AWS Fault Injection Simulator, which was a AWS proprietary tool. So people who have hosted their system on AWS, they can use AWS FIS, which is a proprietary tool by AWS, and you have to pay per use, like how many failures you do. So you have to pay based on that. So let's see what is chaos engineering. So as a definition, let's see. So chaos engineering is the discipline of experimenting on a system in order to build confidence in the system's capability to withstand turbulent conditions in production. So these keywords are really important. First of all, it's a discipline of experimenting. So that's why I said we don't call it testing, we call experimenting. So whenever we say chaos, like we are planning some test sort of thing, we say chaos experiment, because why we call it an experiment is here we don't know the outcome totally. We are just predicting like this will be the outcome. But we don't know what, and it's an experiment. Okay, we are experimenting on the production or on the lower environments. So we call it an experiment, and in order to build confidence, so that is very important, because When your systems become more and more resilient or reliable, they are the system confidence, or let's say the client confidence into production is more and more like they get confident about the system more. Like the production won't cause an issue, or the business will move smoothly without any issue or any hurdle. So these confidence you improve as you perform many experiments and make your system more and more reliable. And again, as you know, so we run the experiments to withstand turbulent conditions. So here what we are saying is chaos or a noise, which is an external noise or internal noise, which can cause an issue. So we are trying to uncover those. And the major thing is production. So here the people will get confused, like if chaos engineering is only in production, how can we do it? Because production is always, maybe you get a very low window time, and you need to plan things beforehand, and production environments are delicate environments, so getting a hold of it is. But basically what we are talking about here is, let's say if you have some 20 test cases, you can ultimately you need to break it down to some 18 test cases, which you 18 or 17 you run in lower environments, and you just flush it off. Like, you don't run it in production. Only the three major ones which you feel you need to test in production, you run it there. So that's how you reduce your window, you use your window in production. And so we'll see how do we do that, how do we plan and implement things. And again, it's a controlled and planned experiment. So this is very important, because we don't do with anything unplanned, because these are very much high visibility tests or high experiments, and if any mistake will be very costly affair. Because so we need to have a clear plan, we need to have the clear approvals and all those in place, and it should be a really controlled one. We should have a rollback plan and all those in place without any issues. So that needs to be really very important. Okay. So, and also preparing for unpredictable failure, that, as I said, so if any predict any failure happens, also we need all those teams available with us when we run the experiments. This is more sort of in production, but lower environments there are flexibilities, because those environments are not like very critical environments, so we can. But production, it's very much important, so we need those people available always, rollback plan and all those. Then we can pre Mm, for any failure, the engineer should be ready to and prepared, so that he takes an action. Okay. Then preparing for game days, we will see what a game day is extensively, like in the module, how to plan the game day, what all we need to do, and all those step by step. So basically for now, what a game day is, nothing but the day when we run our chaos experiment in production. That's called a game day. We call it a game day. So uh, we need to prepare for that game day and all those. And also a way to improve SLAs, because as I said, even high level architectural recommendations given by a chaos engineer, uh, many capacity planning and all those things, when they do, a chaos engineer can play a major role in that, because of the tool and architectural knowledge which he has, and to uncover the issues. So you can fortify the systems, build and move fast. Then, as we know, build confidence in the systems, reveal some weak points, and yeah, so you improve the brand value of, or the goodwill of the customers, by keeping your production very active, and without any issues in production. You reduce your severity issues. Maybe it was initially 5 or 4 monthly, you reduce it to 1 monthly. Like, let's say that is your win for a chaos engineer. It's not like a system can be of zero bugs or zero issues, but how well you reduce the issues or the outages, that's what matters here. Yeah. So this question comes, now we saw what chaos engineering is, but what is not. So this question comes to everyone's mind. So that we need to be aware, because this is where interviews become very tricky. Whenever you give an chaos engineering interview, or let's say there is a session where we need to answer things. So we need to know what is not chaos engineering, because this question comes very frequently, because people know what is, how to do things and all, but what is not covered in this, or let's say what is out of scope of chaos engineering, that we need to be really also worried about. So first of all, random. So there is no randomness in chaos engineering. What all chaos or the failures which we are generating, those are not random. We have planned, we have done it in lower environments, and we know what we are doing. So it's not randomly we are doing something, uh, and out of the blue on that day, but we are doing it in planned manner. Unsupervised, so we don't do it without any supervision. Like whenever we do perform a test, proper supervision is needed. Like proper team should be in place. We should have all the point of contacts for each microservices. Now let's say if you have some 5 or 6 microservices, you need to have, and you are planning for the chaos experiment to for that one microservice, and it's affecting other 2 microservices. So you need people of the all 3 microservices, at least the leads or the main DevOps guys or the development people to perform the task which you may need while you're performing your experiments. Unmonitored. So unmonitored is really useless, because when you perform a chaos experiment, you need to collect all the events. We need to monitor our environment totally, what is happening during our experiments, because that's how we will come into a conclusion what all is going wrong and what all needs to be done to improve the system, for any recommendations, for any tuning, etc. So we need to be really instrumenting our system. So whenever we run an experiment, before that itself, we need to have a proper instrumentation of the system. We have the proper tool, we have the proper monitoring available in the system. We need to check all those. We need to collect those events. We will see what all metrics, what all events we collect, how to monitor our system when an experiment is running. We'll see all those in our coming sessions. But yeah, that is very important. Unmonitored we can't, okay, and also we can't afford, because we get some time, maybe a 15 or 20 minutes window in production, and if we lose the data, what why we are running the experiments, it's a total waste of time. And unexpected, so we can't do any unexpected experiments, because especially uh, what here unexpected we can say, like, or we are focusing here is, let's say you have a day and you have some 10 test cases. Okay, so 10 test cases, but when you're running 1 2, then you come to know, okay, let's have one more test case, which is the third one. As we are doing these two, let's run the third one also. But no, we can't do that. We have a plan for 10 and we stick to that 10. Because why? Because the planning stage, we have done a lot of research on rollback plans, the people who needed, and point of contacts, and all those. So if you do something unexpected, that's a total cycle, like the total cycle changes. And if something goes wrong, and that's a total havoc. So we don't do that. So don't do anything unexpected. And yes, this is very important. Breaking production, that's a nightmare for a chaos engineer. So you never do that. You though there can be issues in production, because that's what you're running the experiment for, and the system can go down, but the rollback should be proper. The production needs to come again up as early as possible. So you need to have that plan, and also that buffer time included in your planning. And creating outages, so that is not at all a feasible one. So how do you avoid this? So the major way to avoid this is to test all these test cases extensively on lower environments, and to proofread it and fix the issues in lower itself if we find any issue. And then to finalize that information, we are not now seeing those issues. We run only those critical test cases in production. Yeah, so any question till now?
If they have monitoring in place, why do they want to do this Java's testing?
Yeah, so because we are not setting up chaos, sorry, monitoring, right? Didn't get your name. Who are you?
Sorry, this is Ravindra. I'm saying
Yeah,
that
hi Ravindra. Yeah,
my question is,
correct.
in production, when they have monitorings in place,
Yeah.
monitors for all the scenarios,
Yeah.
I mean, what is the necessity for doing the Java's engineering or experiments on the system?
Yeah. So basically, here, though you have a number of monitoring tools, or let's say, but those will only allow the data to be collected. It won't avoid the issues or the incidents. So chaos engineer as a role, what is his role about? It's not about a system failure. It's more about how well the system will recover out of any production issue, or how the end user experience will be. Let's say your system is going down due to some auto scaling issue or something like that, which was left because though we test everything, there are production issues happening. And even Amazon or Google, they come out with these production issues every month or every week. So these are, though we say our systems are very much tested and no issues will come, there are issues happening. So how do we avoid those? And if this happen, let's say your instance or the system goes down, how do you read? How do you make your end user experience more well? Like let's say your system is going down, so you redirect your users to some other home page or a landing page till your system is coming back in maybe 2 3 minutes, so that the user doesn't come to know what happened. Like let's say you land him to an offers page where he can go through the offers. Then once he goes through the offer and goes to the then let's say he moves to the next action, that till that we have time to fix it, something like that. So that saves the goodwill of the customer. And also how well your system is recovering, because if something goes down, let's say your system is down, it's recovering in 5 minutes or 2 minutes. Is 5 minutes really, like, though it's an architectural recommendation or the architectural SLA, but is it happening really? How do you test those in production? So that we need to test and proofread, or let's say sign off or certify, okay, these are working properly as mentioned. Or also, good thing is if you can uncover issues, that's a win for a chaos engineer, because then you can work on that and fix it. Yeah, I hope
Oh,
I answered your
okay,
question,
got
Virendra.
it. Yeah,
Yeah,
got it.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, okay. Yeah. Any other question? Okay. Um, yeah. So let's move on. Yeah. So this question comes commonly with people: why chaos engineering? So as we spoke initially, microservice architectures are tricky. Systems are scaling fast. Services will fail. Then dependencies, like there are third-party services which can fail, which you don't test in real world. So and some real-world scenarios like the latency issues or the bandwidth issue, or some packet loss or the DNS server issue, and all those. So reducing the amount of outages, that's our main target objective of a chaos engineer. Then reducing the downtime, then yeah, so ultimately money, because these all breakdowns to your ROI, so return on investment. So how much you spend onto this tuning and all those, it saves money for you. So ultimately that's what is about, like, because a client is interested in, so how what we are doing. So first of all, the outages will reduce the downtime, and that will reduce the cost for the system or the business, and ultimately the goodwill also, because ultimately it's not only money which we save, also the goodwill of the business. Their services work well without any issues. They don't lose any customer, because let's say if you have a e-commerce business and the business service goes down, and that's the time when some new customer is coming into their website, or let's say arriving, so they lose a whole new client because, or a new customer due to that. So that's a big loss of a goodwill or a brand value. Yeah, so let's see what are the principles of chaos engineering. So what basically are form the foundational in the chaos engineering experiments. Okay, so let's see that. First of all, whenever you perform a chaos engineering experiment, you need to have these four things in mind. First of all is define steady state. So what steady state is? So steady state is nothing but what your system's normal behavior. So once your system is running, just a minute. Yeah, so yeah, so you have a system, let's say. an e-commerce system. Okay, so we have some let's see. So we have some 4 microservices, let's say. Okay, let this be some ordering, let this be some accounts, or let this be some offers, and let this be something some some third party services. Okay, let's say something. Okay, so this is interacting with this is interacting with this is interacting a very crude way or a basic system, okay, which you have, and you need to test this. So how do we do that? So let's see, let's say you have, so you are targeting on a on accounts microservice. Okay, so this is what we are targeting. Okay? That's our target microservice. I hope my screen is visible, right, to all?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so this is our target microservice. So now what is happening? Accounts is interacting with orders, okay, and offers. So when we design this experiment, first of all, the important thing is we need to be really worried about what all is the architecture of this accounts microservice. What are the languages? What are the integration points? What are the databases? And all those we need to know. Okay, and next is it is interacting with orders and offers. Okay, so we need to know what is happening in orders by accounts, in offers by accounts. Okay, then what all people we will require, because now we are testing here, so we are impacted by these 3 microservices in our experiment. So we need people, major key people from these 3 microservices. We need the DevOps. Okay, we need the development guy for resolving any critical issue. We need a tester, a QA, so that uh, if any test we need to run, or some traffic we need to generate, some like the performance guy, let's say we have one performance guy available to generate a simulator traffic. So we need to have all those. Now the main thing is what is, so we have all this, so what is the steady state? Let's say we have this website, okay, which is a login screen. Okay, so when the system is working properly without any issue, the login works normally. So once you log in, it goes to the landing page. Okay, let's say. Now what happens in our experiment when we are doing accounts? So what steady state is, that's what I'm coming to. Okay, so after login, it's coming to the landing page. So this is the steady state of the system. So once we do the experiment, and when our experiment is finished, we need to be back on this, like the system should be on the steady state again. Like the steady state shouldn't be affected by though that issue. That's our I can say KPI, or that our experiment is that our system is resilient or reliable. Okay, so we need to have that steady state proper after the experiment also. So this is the steady state. Okay, yeah, so defining steady state, some measurable output of a system that indicates normal behavior. So what is normal here? So normal is once you log in, the landing page should come. Now how the landing page comes, because it should be exactly how what is expected from a proper system. Okay, there shouldn't be any issues. Like let's say you have a your landing page is coming, and let's say you have your landing page is coming, and uh, initially when normally the landing page has this let's say some text or some welcome. Okay, some welcome text, and once when you're running the experiment, this welcome is not coming. Okay, so that's an issue. Okay, we need to fix that. So that's not a steady state, because steady state was we had this proper welcome here. So that was our steady state we defined. Okay, So that's what is steady state. So whatever is expected before and after experiment, that's what is steady state. So we need to define that whenever we start an experiment beforehand, and we need to be clearly aware about. So now to give a more example, like I guess it would be clearer, but let's say one more example if we take, okay, because it is very important, because once you are aware how to define a steady state, only that's what is our expected result in our chaos engineering. So we need to have that proper steady state defined, otherwise things can go wrong, because we won't be able to find an issue if properly we don't know how to define a steady state. Let's say this time we take the orders microservice. Okay, we have orders and it's interacting with accounts, with offers, and let's say some third party delivery. Okay, let's say it's Uber. So, okay, yeah, so once we have, so now let's say now this time we are focusing on orders. Okay, so what we are doing here, so orders we have it. So what will be our major microservice which we are targeting? It's orders. Okay. Yeah, so we have orders. Okay, so what all microservices will be affected? We have accounts, we have offers, and we have a third party service. Okay, sorry for my handwriting, this is just like, I hope it's clear, just for our uh, understanding I'm doing this. And you can stop me anytime if you have any query for this one. Okay, yeah, so we have this. Okay, so major microservice which we are interested is in orders. Okay, that's our critical microservice we have now. So let's say you have a ordering page. Okay, where you have your form and you press order to land into an order placed. So here the steady state is this page. Okay, so we define our steady state in such a way that we have this the final output of our system when we do that action. Okay, then what we do, we run our experiment. Let's say we are attacking the orders now in our experiment, and the order microservice goes down. What happened? Let's say if all the orders microservice going down, so surely the order place will not work. So what will be our steady state? So what will be our so surely the steady state won't come. Okay, so we define, so when this happens, what should be our steady state? So when that happens, we need to have another page where we get, because if the orders totally goes down, surely the order will not get placed. Okay, so we need to redirect the user to some other page. So that's our way of fixing it. Okay, this is our solution, that we are redirecting the user to a new page. Now let's say we are not bringing down the orders totally, we are just bringing down an instance or a replica. Okay, so what happens, the auto scaling should work, and new pod should warm up, and nothing should happen to our steady state is nothing but this one, right? So nothing should happen to this steady state in that case, because our total microservice hasn't gone down. Okay, we are just bringing down a pod or something. So steady state is active and our test is passed. So basically test is passed in terms of resiliency. Okay, the system is resilient. We call resilient or reliable, you can use any word. Okay, that system is resilient. But if this is the case happening, system wasn't resilient, we made it resilient, or let's say we made it uh, a fix. We made it a fix. So this is the win of a chaos engineer, because we found an issue. This is okay, like we have the test done, and we have proofreaded it, or let's say we have signed it off, that system is resilient. So these are the two cases of a steady state. Yeah, so steady state is what we saw now. So it's the nothing but the before and after behavior which you are expecting. So that we need to define whenever you start an experiment. Okay. Next is the hypothesis. So that is very important. So what is hypothesis? So hypothesis is nothing but it's in a way steady state, but what it defines is nothing but what you are expecting from your test in a sentence, like or in let's say hypothetically what you are so basically steady state is nothing but the system behavior in whole. Okay, hypothesis comes in terms of the test cases which you have. Okay, so let's say you are adding one test case where you have you're testing ordering with two replicas, you bring it down. Okay, so you give an hypothesis, so this should be around the steady state. So what we mean about around the steady state is we have a steady state, right? We already defined one steady state. So hypothesis should be with respect to that steady state only. I meant if you are focusing on orders, you are focusing on orders. You can't hypothesize accounts because your steady state is around orders. Okay, so you need to have an hypothesis of the test case around the orders only. So you hypothesize saying, okay, you say in a sentence, what is the expected behavior when the experiment is running? Okay, that is the hypothesis. So you just give, okay, when you are bringing down the two replicas, the system auto scaling should shoot up, and the system should act like something. Okay, like ordering should work fine, something like that. So that's our hypothesis. So that is our expected result. Then next, third step is introducing the variables. So what is the variables? Like variables are nothing but our chaos, okay, the noise, what we're interested in. We bring down the servers, we like crash the hard drives, we work with the network connections, bandwidth issues, latency, packet loss, black hole attacks, and all those. So we can plan our experiments based on our hypothesis, what we are interested in. So what our hypothesis is will define our experiment or what failure we are injecting. Okay. Then the fourth one is you disprove your hypothesis by looking for a difference in steady state between the control group and experimental group. So try to disprove is nothing but you have a hypothesis. So what you're expecting, like, okay, this is the thing which might go wrong, and you compare it with the steady state. So here, what we're talking about the control group here is nothing but the yeah. So the control group here, what we are talking, and the experimental group is nothing but the same group. Only thing is, a control group is the place where the real event is happening, and experimental group is where you are doing the experiment. Okay, and it has to be most of the time the setup should be almost similar because then only our results will be valid. Otherwise, and only the things could change because the control group can be, let's say, it's in production and you are doing it in performance environment, that's fine, but both the environment, like the infrastructure, the other things should be same which you are testing, the group. So that's the control group and the experimental group. So you try to disprove it that the hypothesis you were thinking is not there's no difference, like a steady state is maintained, so the system is resilient. That's the fourth step. So here what you need to understand is you are trying to disprove the hypothesis. That's in terms of a client or the stakeholder that the system is resilient. But if your hypothesis proved right, okay, that means it's a win for a chaos engineer. You can fix that issue. Okay, you have something, you have found some bug in the system and you fix it. So fixing happens, as I said, in chaos engineering technically and also experimental. I meant through the processes. Okay, so you need to define the process to if that issue happens, how to resolve it. Yeah, so again, so if your steady state is very hard to disrupt, so let's say if you have a steady state defined and it's whatever you do, the steady state is not changing. Okay, so the system is more resilient, of course, right? And you build a hypothesis, as I said, always around the steady state behavior. So whatever your steady state you have defined, you build a hypothesis around it. We'll see, like when you see an experiment, right, you will come to know what is hypothesis and what is the steady state in words. Now maybe it might be going over the head because it's a new concept, but when we see the experiment, the plan and all, we'll come to. And then vary the real world events, the chaos. Okay, the injecting the failures, we need to vary the CPU utilization and all those. Then bringing down the pods, bandwidth, packet loss, all those talking about. So then ultimately running the experiments in production, because ultimately that's our main goal, okay, to run those experiments in production. So we need to find out which all experiments we can run in production, then automating it. So we will see like how to automate our chaos experiments using Jenkins and Terraform, okay. Because CI/CD is becoming very much popular nowadays. So we will be seeing in our sessions like how to automate our chaos experiments using CI/CD pipeline for Gremlin, and how to perform these experiments like a regression. Maybe in 2 weeks, you can schedule a pipeline and all those. We'll see that. And minimizing blast radius. This is very important. So let's see what a blast radius is. Okay. These are some basic keywords and concepts which you need to be aware. So then only you'll understand the coming sessions very clearly. So that's why I'm just focusing on this little more. Yeah. So let's say, what is a blast radius? Okay. So you have an experiment. First, you define your steady state. Yeah. So first, you define a steady state. Okay. You have a steady state defined. That's our principle first. Then we have the hypothesis defined. Okay. So then we have our experiment. Okay. We are running the experiment. Let's say here we can divide it into fail and pass. So what is fail? Fail is nothing but our system fails, like there comes like some issue and the system is not resilient, or the steady state behavior is not satisfied. So what we do next? So we need to have an abort plan, okay, and a rollback. Okay. Now if it's a pass, so why let's say our experiment, we did it, and we what we expected from the steady state, it happened. Okay. So that's what happened. Yeah. So and our experiment is a pass. Okay. So that's what we will call a pass experiment. Okay. So this will then continue for multiple test cases. Okay. So whenever a fail happens, we abort and roll back and then fix it. Okay. But when the pass comes, we have multiple test cases. Hypothesis, let's say some 10 hypotheses we have. Okay. We need to test all those 10. So we do it cyclically one by one. Now the blast radius comes into play. What is a blast radius? Blast radius is nothing but the radius at which we do the experiment, or let's say where you have this your system, like what you're targeting. Okay. Now let's see what is a blast radius. So you have a system with some 4 microservices, and currently in your experiment you are targeting only these 2 microservices. Okay. So that is your blast radius. Okay. So that's nothing but the components which will be affected by your experiment. That's what is blast radius. So you need to be really minimizing the blast radius. So what we are talking about minimizing the blast radius is nothing but it has to be really small, because when you perform an experiment, if something goes wrong, and if you consider the whole system in one stretch, so that will be a total chaos. Okay. Because first of all, you won't be able to find the issue, because there are multiple things which you are targeting at a time. Second thing, you won't be getting the total support from all the people at a time. Third, it will be total chaos. Okay. Monitoring it, people, resources required to do that will be huge. So we minimize our blast radius as small as possible. Then you scale up based on the requirement. And from my experience, we never test a whole system at once anytime. So if you have some 10 microservices, we group it into 3 3 3, or how much ever the integrations or interactions are happening, that many. If the order is interacting with all the 5 microservices, we have 6 microservices, but all 10 at a time won't come. Okay, so yeah, that's about minimizing the blast rate. That is very important. That's why I was just saying about. So this is how a typical process of a chaos engineering looks like. First of all, we form a hypothesis, we run the experiment, then if it's a success, we scale up and repeat. Scale up and repeat in sense, the radius, we increase the radius, and we do perform the experiments. Now if it fails, we find and fix the issue. Then if fail, the abort conditions are nothing but we look for some metrics, or we define our metrics when we plan our experiments itself. Which we will use it for aborting. So whenever we find that metric, let's say some CPU utilization goes above 90%, and that's our metric for abort. Okay, so we abort our, that's an abort condition. Okay, so we abort our experiment, and we roll back our because it's in, let's say it's happening in production, so this needs to be quick. Okay, so we roll back, and then we have time for finding and fixing the issue. So we fix the issue and then run an experiment again once the issue is fixed, and we succeed, let's say, and then the same thing repeats. So that's how a process of a chaos engineering happens. Yeah, any questions till now?
Yes, yeah. What is that scale up and repeat? Repeat is fine. What is that scale up?
Yeah, okay. I will just explain you. Sorry for the cough a little bit. The climate is getting really bad here. Yeah, so let's say you have a system again. You have a system. Okay. You have some 6 microservices here. So in your current experiment, let's say you have experiment 1. Okay, you targeted A. Okay, now next experiment you target B. Okay, now you target A and B. So that is about scaling up. Am I clear? So you just scale it up, like instead of 1 microservice, you test 2 microservices together, because initially our main focus was only on A. Now we have A and B together.
Okay.
Yeah, so that is about scale up and repeat. Yes, as the word suggests, you repeat your test cases one by one as required. You scale up and repeat it. That's about scaling up and repeating. Yeah. Any other question? Yeah. So basically, for this course, we'll be using Google Cloud, a free tier. Okay. So if everyone who is going to continue with the course, or let's say we will be continuing, so you can create a free account in Google Cloud. And the cloud base, there is no dependency. So if you're doing it in AWS also, nothing changes, only the names change of the cloud. Let's say if I am running a VM instance here, it will be easy to instance in AWS, but the commands will be same in both. There is no difference because we are working with the same sort of scenarios both places. Only the systems change, the cloud names change, but the architecture is similar. So if any changes are there also, I will just call it out if there is any change in command or something in AWS and Google Cloud. But most of the things are same. So we are using Google Cloud here, and we will create a e-commerce we have a e-commerce platform demo application which we will be deploying and performing the experiments on that. Then we will be installing Gremlin agent and all those. So for that, first of all, you, as a prerequisite, you can create a free tier of Google Cloud and keep it ready. because then you can do hands-on as I do, okay, in the class itself, and you can clear the queries as we go. Uh, so that thing is there. Then we'll be using we'll be seeing Chaos Toolkit, which is open source tool. Not very extensively, but yes, we'll be seeing one open source Chaos tool, which is Chaos Toolkit. Then Gremlin we'll be seeing very extensively on, as I said, on many different infrastructures and systems and all those. How to install those, how to run those experiments, how to collect the metrics and all. We'll be seeing that. uh, yeah, so Gremlin, then again you can download and keep. You can have this Gremlin account created if interested. Otherwise, we'll be doing as we go in the class. We'll be doing, so that time also you can create it. We'll be seeing Gremlin extensively. So that time you can do it. No, not required now. You can do it later on also. We'll be seeing how to do that and all those. So this is how a typical Gremlin dashboard looks like. So you have different attacks and all. So we'll be seeing one by one each attack, how to do that, and the different. You can create scenario sort of attacks, and some you can play around many things in this tool because it provides around 12 fault injections which you can do. So we can do that. We'll be seeing all those one by one. So if you see the, like, currently I haven't created any targets here, so it's not showing up. But if you see here attack, you can see different types of attacks like packet loss, black hole attack, DNS attacks. Then we have resource attacks like CPU, disk, and all those. Then we have this attack state attacks, we call it, which is like shutdown attacks. Then um, like CPU based attacks, and these 12 types of attacks are there. We'll be seeing one by one in all attacks. We'll be seeing one by one extensively on different systems like Kubernetes, Docker, and all those, and their significances. What is it? What that attacks like mean really when we do it, and all those we'll be seeing in the coming sessions. Yeah, I guess then let's stop it here for today. I can take some questions if there. Otherwise, let's stop it here today. We'll continue tomorrow.
Is it the paid tool or free one?
No, this is a free tool. For our course, we won't be using anything premium. We'll be using everything free only.
Okay. In the premium, do we have any other options more than this one?
Not the options, but the targets. Like here you have a target, like they have restricted to 2 targets. Okay. But for premium, you can increase it to 50, 100 based on the price you pay.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do we have any application to practice here or to get hands-on?
Yes. Like we will be deploying one e-commerce application called it's called Hipster. It's a e-commerce platform provided by GitHub. Like they give it free. It's a total microservice based application. We will be deploying that application and running the experiments on that. So in that you will be testing microservices. Like what happens now when you run the experiments, like bringing down an instance and all is an easier part, but you need to know how to target one specific microservice using tags or IDs or and all those. So you need a system or a service for that. Okay, so for that only we have that e-commerce service. We will be testing that in our Gremlin. So different, and also the databases. We'll be testing databases, right? So that time we need some databases, to test. So we have that application, yes, and I'll be showing how to deploy it. So you can also do hands-on on that. Everything like even Kubernetes from scratch. I will show you how to install a Kubernetes onto a Google Cloud instance, how to create a cluster and all those. Then deploying the Gremlin agent onto that. So everything, even Docker, we have to create a container, because you can see here there are 3 options, right? Containers, hosts, and Kubernetes. So we need to test, we need to practice on all these 3. So we will be deploying containers, Kubernetes hosts. Hosts are nothing but some monolithic systems you need to test, right? So that time hosts can be useful. Then the services we are targeting, like different services if we have, so that we can. We'll be seeing all those.
Means if you want to do JavaScript engineering, do we need to install in the host? Means where application deploy? Is it required or not?
So basically it's an agent. You don't need to do it on all the instances. Like let's say you have a Kubernetes cluster, you need to install it only on the master.
Okay.
So yeah, so that agent will discover all the services.
Okay. If I have PCF services, what is the case?
Yeah, so what is basically the you have that services on?
Some web applications I have they deployed in PCF services, and some web services are there.
Okay, so yeah, same thing. You just need to go to that. You need to just go to the GUI. So that we'll be seeing, right, how to do that. It's a similar process. Okay, for everything. Yeah,
Okay.
for every service it's similar. Only thing is the process flow will change little bit here and there. Like Kubernetes for a monolithic system, for a host. Like let's say you are targeting a single instance. Okay, so that also you can do. Yeah, let's say you are hosted on GoDaddy. Okay, a shared hosting. Okay, let's say. Well, even for that also you can do that. There's not limitation for that.
Okay. Okay. Then fine.
Yeah. Ravindra, you were asking something, right?
Oh, no, I don't have anything.
Okay.
Just yeah, I want to have. I mean, can it be used for systems like big data Hadoop-based systems?
We can, but just the thing is you need to have that accesses to those infra systems. Okay, if you have that, you can do it for any. That's what I'm saying. There is no limitation. You need to have the access to those instances or the services.
You mean this tool? This tool can be used.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Because this is basically it's more about the infrastructure or the integration points, okay, which we are targeting. So what is running inside is not that a big matter, but how you integrate it with that system, that's what is matter. It's an agent, okay, you install it and you perform it, and there is no overhead also. We have tested it. So the overheads installed, like when you install a Gremlin, is very low. Like the usage of Gremlin agent, because this will run only when you are running an failure. Okay, so till that it will be dormant. So once you inject a failure only, this will become active, and it will not use much of resources also, because it shouldn't add any overhead to our system.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, then I think we are good today. Let's continue tomorrow. Thank you all for joining.